Welcome to All Things Artful. I'm Spanky Harrell, and today we're with Jack Sorenson in his studio talking about his wonderful Western art. Jack, tell us a little bit about your life. Where were you born?
I was born here in Amarillo. We lived here. My dad trained cutting horses when I was a little kid, and we lived here until I was in second grade. Then we bought a little piece of Powder Canyon and moved down there.
Oh, wow. Share a little bit about your family background when you lived down there.
Well, my dad built a little frontier town, and we had cabins to rent in the bottom and horses, and we did little mock gunfights, so we had gunfights, and I was always around guns and horses, and I drove a stagecoach for 4 years, and that was my first real job, was driving the stagecoach.
How old were you when you drove the stagecoach?
I was probably 14, 15, something like that. And we had a little, I'll tell you a funny story about, one time we had a little mock gunfight, robbery of the stagecoach, and I was one of the robbers this particular day, and I was supposed to jump up on the side of the coach, and the people were all inside of it, so we would just fire a gun in the air and I would fall off because they couldn't see me until I fell. But this kid that was new aimed his .44 right at my face, and so I knew it was going to blast me, and so I just fell off, and it spooked the mules enough they ran over my leg with the stagecoach. So I'm probably the only guy you've ever met that's been run over by a stagecoach. But I had the most perfect childhood for what I do now, because about a third of my paintings are Old West, and about a third of them are modern day cowboys, and then the rest are Christmas. And I couldn't have written it out any better. This is how God planned. He knew what I was going to become, and so I've always been fascinated by the Old West and, you know, stories of trail drives and stuff like that. And because of Six Gun City, I knew all the tack and the harness on stagecoaches and everything. So I had a huge advantage over most people that go into this field. I actually did live it. My kids used to see photographs of me at Six Gun City driving the stagecoach, and they thought I really lived in the Old West. I say, Dad, I don't understand. Are you that old? You know, but it was perfect. I couldn't have asked for a better childhood.
As you were growing up in Powder Canyon, with all of that beauty around you, but yet being the cowboy that you were, when did you realize you were interested in art, not cowboying?
I think always. I mean, always in the back of my mind. My mom said I announced to the family when I was 6 that I was going to be a full-time artist, and I don't remember that, but I'm sure it's true. I could always draw, and I mean, my first grade teacher, the first day of school, took me home and said she wanted to talk to my mom, and she thought, the reason she did, I thought I was in trouble, but the reason she did, she said, I think he's a child prodigy. He can draw horses and people and animals, and I could. It was just a total gift from God. I always knew I was born to do what I do now, and I love training horses, but that was always for me just a temporary thing, one more step I had to take knowledge-wise in order to become the artist I wanted to be.
So when did you step into the role of really working towards being an artist?
I had probably when I was in my mid-teens, I would go down to Powder Canyon, and I really learned to paint in Powder Canyon. I didn't work from photographs or anything. I would study the rock formations and the clay and so forth, and I knew if I could master that with that range of color and everything, and I'd always paint horses, you know, I'd go out in the pen and try to paint, and I don't remember making a conscious decision. I'll tell you, when Jean made it, I was still breaking horses, and we were dating, we weren't married yet, and I would paint at night in my off time, and I had, on this particular day, been bucked off 9 times by different horses. And I was so sore, I was trying to paint, and I couldn't lift my right arm. I would hold it with my left arm. And Jean saw that, and she said, that's it. You're not taking any more horses. You're now a full-time painter. And I never took another colt after that, and I've been painting full-time 41 years now. So.
Wow. And you mentioned Jean, and who is Jean, Jack?
Jean is my soulmate, my wife, and the best artist wife ever. Because from the very beginning, you know, I'm with a bunch of old cowboys. They had no real appreciation for art, but she believed in me from the beginning. She worked at an art gallery when we first met, and they were selling other artists' work, and when the owner wasn't around, she would hang my paintings in the gallery. And I'm sure they would have annoyed the owners if they knew that. But she wouldn't sell them or anything, but she just wanted to show other people what I did.
And when and where did y'all meet?
I was running the stable one day, and she skipped her English class and came riding, and I was her guide. And so I tell her I've been her guide now for 41 years. So. Actually, I had to watch her close, or she would run her horse. That's what it was.
Okay. How has family played a part in your life as an artist, Jack?
That's who I am. I mean, Spunky, you can't talk to me for 5 minutes that I don't mention God or family. That's who I am. That's what I'm about. I always approach everything from that standpoint. And I think the heart, if there is heart in my paintings, it's because I have such a wonderful family, and I love them to death. They all love me, so.
Did you have any role models who influenced your direction?
I did. My dad used to buy and sell horses at the auction in Clovis, and I was 12 years old, I believe, and I went with him, and we stopped for lunch, and inside the cafe there at the auction, they had a calendar done by a cowboy artist named Tom Ryan, who lived on the 4/6s and painted the 4/6s a lot. And so I knew about him because he'd done Western Horseman covers and other things before, but I'd never seen a painting like this. A cowboy was driving some Hereford cattle out of an old saloon, and this painting just hypnotized me. I was spellbound. I couldn't take my eyes off of it, and my dad didn't understand why it had such a hypnotic effect on me, and it did. I couldn't stop thinking about it. And we went home. All the way home, I was thinking about that painting. It affected my life. And years later, I got to meet Tom Ryan, and I told him that story. And he said to me, a lot of artists frowned on him doing calendars for Brown Bigelow because they didn't feel like it was fine art. It was beneath them. And if he hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have been affected. I wouldn't have seen that. My whole life could have been different. And so I determined very early that I was going to be the poor man's artist. I was going to try to have fine art accessible to people that couldn't afford paintings or prints or anything. So I look on licensing images of my paintings much differently than most fine artists. I do it because anybody can afford a jigsaw puzzle. Anybody can afford a Christmas card. And I want to have the chance to affect people the way Tom Ryan's calendar affected me. So that did move me in that direction. And I still, to this day, have a lot of my friends say you shouldn't be so exposed in your art. But there's going to be a painting on that jigsaw puzzle anyway. Why not have it be fine art? That's the way I look at it. And I don't think it cheapens what I do at all. I think it gives me more exposure.
Let's talk a little bit about your exposure recently. Texas, the musical drama, celebrated their 50th year this year. Mm-hmm. How did you play a part in that?
Well, I'd been fortunate enough and blessed to have done that, had my paintings in that program 3 times before. And when the 50th was coming up, the Penn Heritage Foundation asked me if I would consider doing it, and of course I was honored to do it. And originally they were going to put 50-year anniversary show, including 50 paintings by Jack Sorenson. And they ended up selling so many ads because it was the 50th anniversary, the book was getting too thick, so they cut some of my paintings out, but I'm proud to have 40-something in there. So.
Okay, and there's something else special going on this year. American Quarter Horse, that's located here in Amarillo, really loves Jack Sorenson.
And I go to that museum a lot, and I teach I give demonstrations on painting and drawing a horse. And they have an educational program where high school art students from all over the Panhandle will come, and I talk to them about artists, and maybe some of them will become full-time artists. I hope so. But each year at their annual show, which is called America's Horse in Art, meaning, of course, quarter horses, they ask one artist in the show to be the signature artist, and his signature painting is what they run in all the ads and on the catalog and magazine covers and everything. And I was honored to be chosen this year as the signature artist.
Okay, let's talk about Leaning Tree.
Leaning Tree is, they sell Christmas and greeting cards out of Boulder. And I'll tell you, when I was first beginning as an artist, I set 4 goals for myself. And they were way up here, I thought. I didn't really know if I'd achieve them or not, but one of them was to be a Leaning Tree card. Have one of my paintings on a Leaning Tree card. And my first rejection letter came from Leaning Tree. My wife took some, probably Polaroids, I don't know, but took some pictures of some of my paintings and sent them off to Leaning Tree and said, I think my husband will make a good card artist. And they sent us a rejection letter. I'd love to have it now and have it framed in this studio because I've over the years, I've become one of their top artists, and I've been with that company now since '94, I believe. And they've sold around 14 million cards of my paintings. But that letter's long gone because my wife's Italian, and I barely got to read it before it was gone. So.
Okay, what about Western Horsemen?
Western Horsemen was another one of my 4 goals. I said, I pray that my painting will be on Western Horsemen one day. My mom, if you think about this, when I was a kid, my only exposure to fine Western art was either a Leaning Tree card or Western Horseman cover. Each month they had a painting on the cover. And I would get off the bus at school sometimes, and my mom would, as soon as I got in the house, she'd say, Jack, you gotta look at this month's cover. I want you to paint like this guy. And it was usually Joe Beeler. She loved Joe Beeler. And later on, he and I became friends. And but I not only got to do one cover, I've got to do many, many covers. So I'm very pleased with it.
Let's think about your 4 goals. We touched on Leaning Tree. We touched on Western Horsemen.
I rode the Sad Monkey Railroad down in Powder Canyon one time, and part of the spiel of the conductor was no artist had ever successfully painted Powder Canyon. It wasn't true. I've since found out that it had been painted well before, but that was his spiel. And I remember thinking to myself, that'd be a great thing to be known for. And so that was one of my goals. And the other one was I wanted to be one of the top horse painters. I wanted people to consider me one of the top horse painters because I studied horses. I love horses. I could go out in a pasture and just for half a day do nothing but watch good-looking horses move around and how they interact with each other. And I've been horse crazy forever. And my mom said I could draw a horse before I could write my name. I don't remember that, but maybe it's true. I don't remember ever not being able to draw a horse. So.
Let's talk a little bit about Powder Canyon, where you grew up, and something specific that's precious to you is a location in Powder Canyon.
It is.
Tell us a little bit about it.
There's a particular point above the first water crossing, and I think it's the most beautiful point in the whole Powder Canyon. And I used to paint it. I've painted it probably more than any other single feature in the state park. And I always jokingly referred to it as Sorenson Point. When people would ask me, what's that, where is that? And I said, well, you don't know where Sorenson Point is? And it was like a joke. Well, a magazine was interviewing me once called Persimmon Hill out of the Cowboy Hall of Fame in Oklahoma City. And the man asked, I was there painting when he was interviewing me, and he said, what is that peak so I can put it in an article? And I told him that story. I always joked that it's Sorenson Point, but it's really not named that. And The park manager at the time was a man named High Newby. And High Newby was a great friend of mine. His son was my model for years, my best model I've ever had. And High read that article, and one day he called me and he said, "Jack, I want to show you something." And we drove down into the canyon. There was this one of those official state signs, Sorenson Point elevation, so-and-so. And that's the greatest honor you could have. I mean, I paint down there so much. I've painted Powder Canyon more than 400 times. And to have that named after me is quite an honor.
What do you love about Powder Canyon through the eyes of an artist?
The range of color is amazing. I mean, as you know, I've painted with some really famous guys, Ned Mueller, and I painted down there. And he even asked me, he said, "How long did it take you to be able to tackle this thing?" Because it's frustrating at first because you have such a wide range of colors piled on top of each other. And none of them, when you're painting them, you can't paint anything out of key or it'll jump off because you have that wide range of color. And I was always fascinated by that. I love rocks. I don't know how else to explain it, but throw a pile of rocks down and put some vegetation around them, you can really play with that in your painting compositions.
Jack, as we're talking about your art, tell me very specifically where you think your inspiration comes from daily.
I don't know how to answer that other than Hank Williams one time was asked, "How does a man in his 20s write so many classic songs?" And he said, "I just hold the pencil, hoss." And that's how I look at it. It isn't me, it's God. And sometimes he'll give me a great idea right as I'm falling asleep and I have to come out here and do a sketch. And Jean will tell you, it's not uncommon for her to wake up and me be out here trying to draw something before I forget it. Or sometimes they come with the title and everything included. I truly feel like I'm the middleman when I have a great painting.
Tell us a little bit about your style.
I'll tell you this. Nobody's painting should remind you of anybody else on earth, ever. Because I think of it like this. You and I learned cursive exactly the same way. Your signature looks nothing like mine, right? Your horse shouldn't look anything like mine. Your lighthouse shouldn't look like mine. They should both look like the actual thing, but our personality has to come out in that, whatever it is we're drawing or painting. And I think today, my only gripe with a lot of young artists, they're so reliant on photography that everybody starts to look the same. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. And a great compliment I get sometimes is if I do a magazine cover and somebody say, "I could tell that was your horse from clear across the room." And that's what I'm striving for. I want it to look like the real horse, and I do a lot of horse portraits of specific horses. But it has to look like that horse, but it has to have my kind of stamp on it. I don't know how to say it any better, but my style is just by luck and by chance seems to hit kind of in the middle. It's not too loose, not too tight, and people appreciate it that like all kinds of art.
And so as we talk about your style, tell us a little bit about your signature.
Well, when I first began painting, Sorenson is not a very common name, and I thought people couldn't remember Sorenson, so I thought, well, what can I put under my name that would be easy to remember? And that horseshoe, I played with several different things, but the horseshoe seems to be memorable. And now, every painting I've done since probably 74 or 73 has that horseshoe under my name.
Tell us about your medium.
I paint in oils I don't use any kind of medium with it. I use the paint straight out of the tube. I like to paint with thick paint because you can see every brush stroke. If I had linseed oil or walnut oil or something else in it, those brush strokes would meld together. And I feel like painting should bring joy to the viewer because I have joy when I'm doing it, and that's why I want them to see every brush stroke. If a painting starts to become tedious to me, I stop. because that will be readable too in that painting. I'm a workaholic. I stand usually 7 or 8 hours every day at the easel, but it's not like digging a ditch or digging post holes. It's fun, and I try to keep my level of joy up the whole time I'm working.
When a viewer looks at your painting, what are you hoping they'll see? What are you hoping they'll walk away with?
I pray before every single painting that it will touch somebody in a deep way, and the way that Tom Ryan painting touched me. And I know that my prayers are being answered because I get emails and letters from people that are so moving, that you were my dad's favorite artist, and when he was in hospice he wanted your prints around his bed and stuff like that. And that's not me, that's God doing that. And it just is so rewarding that you can move someone by what you do. I mean, if I manufactured something that harmed people, you know, I wouldn't get that same reward. I'm creating beauty, hopefully, and I'm trying to every day top myself. You can't look at any 3-year period in my career that the third year's not better than the first year. And I hope that continues until I'm gone. I want to keep improving. Most artists, and I won't say most artists, but a lot of artists fall into that trap that they hit on something that's popular. They'll spend the whole rest of their life repeating that same thing. And to me, that's not joy anymore. You're just a craftsman. You're doing that same thing over and over. And I don't ever want to get into that. Galleries like you to do one thing and focus on that one thing, then they can market you as the teepee painter, say. And they want you to do, to most art galleries, a great painting is the one that just sold. So do 10 more like that one. As a creative person and someone that's constantly trying to do new compositions, new ideas, storylines, that would drive me crazy. I couldn't do it. I would refuse to do it. I do refuse to do it. And a lot of times I'll do successful paintings on a magazine or something, and I'll have people want to commission one like that. I say, I've already told that story. I can't do that again, you know.
And when you say that, I've already told that story, we've all heard a picture is worth 1,000 words. Mm-hmm. I know that much of who you are is telling a story. It's inviting the viewer in. Tell us a little bit about that.
I love paintings that tell a story, but the greatest painters to me throughout history are the ones that did tell stories in their art. And in Western art, Russell was the main guy. He had a great kind of warped sense of humor like I do, and that comes through in his work. And I studied, when I was a kid, I would study books on him and Norman Rockwell. You know, I'd look at Norman Rockwell's stuff and I'll say, all right, he told that story. Think about this. You're telling a Christmas story that takes place in a barn. You have to do it all in one image. It's not a panel like in a cartoon or something, so how do you tell them, this is Christmas, here's the story? And the clever ways he would do that, you know, he may have a calendar there that just said December 25th on or 24th, or you might see out the window a hint of a Christmas tree with lights on it, or whatever it was. Mm-hmm. And so I studied the way these champions of storytelling would work, and I started using them. Years ago, my agent wanted to market me as the Western Norman Rockwell. And I said, no, we're not doing that. And because I don't want my paintings to remind anybody of Norman Rockwell. I don't want them to remind them of anybody. And so I wouldn't let him do that, but I'm thrilled that he thought I was enough of a storyteller to even suggest something like that.
With storytelling a part of who you are, let's talk about a method.
All right.
With your creativity.
I do usually start with a little sketch smaller than this one that's just rough, where I'm working out the composition. And in this painting, it's a circular composition. The focal point of this were these main horses. But the angle of the spears, none of the lances, none of that is by accident. The angle of the clouds is all trying to reinforce that composition. And so once I get a composition that I like, I go through all my books to make sure Russell and Remington, none of those guys ever did one like that. And I just play with the horses until I get all their legs pulling you in the directions I want you to go. It still has to look convincing as a horse running or, you know, whatever they're doing, but it's all for a purpose, to direct the viewer's eye.
This completed piece was how big?
It was 3 by 5 feet. I just finished it about a week ago.
And how long did it take you? With you telling us that you work about 7 to 8 hours a day.
I believe it took about 7 days or 8 days. The drawing actually took as long as the painting because you don't have photo reference for something like this. It's all guesswork, and so I'm constantly playing with that drawing for several days while I watch Gunsmoke or Bonanza or something. And once I get it to where I like it, then I do a bigger version like this is and work out more detail. And then I transfer it to the canvas. That usually takes probably 4 or 5 days before.
Jack, I'd love to talk a little bit about Buffalo Thunder.
All right.
Tell us about the process towards your composition for Buffalo Thunder.
All right. I had been to see the buffalo over in Goodnight and painted them. Josh and I painted them out there a couple of times, and they're just standing, milling around or walking. And I wanted to do them running. I do a lot of action paintings, and I never had actually seen a buffalo running, except maybe in Dances with Wolves or something. But four-legged animals basically all run the same way. And so I wanted to do this action painting. So I got the idea I would start drawing buffalo running and try to do as many different angles and many different positions as I can. And so over the course of maybe 3 days, I started doing all these drawings and not knowing, you know, which direction I needed them to be going in or which angle or anything. But I was learning, you know, I was filing it away, more anatomy knowledge and everything. And I put that horse in just to give me a break from all the buffalo. But I just, as you can see, I just kept drawing and drawing and drawing. And when I was done with all of these, I think that's, no, there's one more page, 2 more pages. But you notice no 2 of these are the same. No 2 of them are, the legs are the same or the same direction or anything else. But I just kept drawing. And by the time I was done with these drawings, I could do a buffalo in virtually any position. And so I knew I was pretty much ready for that, start that big painting of the buffalo stampede. And so I called the man that owns the buffalo in Goodnight. I asked him to come to my studio and would he look at these and check off the ones that didn't look right and so forth. And he came over, he said, there's one thing wrong. A buffalo has a real small throat, and if it runs more than 100 yards, it has to open its mouth like a dog, and its tongue will hang out. And I didn't know that because I'd never seen them do that. And so in the finished painting, you'll see several of the buffalo. I have their mouth open and their tongue hanging out. So,
how has your work changed and developed over the years, in your opinion?
I see better. I know that I'm training my eye to see the actual colors. And I paint from life more than I paint from photographs. And I learned to paint from life. Most artists learn to paint from photographs. And by going, when I'm driving, I'm constantly thinking, how would I mix that color? You know, I'm thinking everything in terms of painting. And I look at paintings I've done of Palo Duro Canyon. This lighthouse is almost the same angle as one I did for the Chamber of Commerce years ago, 25 years ago. And the color is just so much more accurate now than it was back then because I can see it better. I know how to mix colors better. And people say that to me all the time, your colors just look so real. And it's because of studying the color from life. Are
you your greatest critic? Do you look at a painting?
No, my wife's my greatest critic. I did a painting for St. Thomas. They were going to make a mosaic, and it was of the Blessed Mother ascending into heaven, and the cherubs were lifting her up. And so Jean came in, and I was playing with the sketch, and she said, "Why are all those midget wrestlers lifting that woman up?" So I changed my whole idea. But no, she can spot anything that's wrong. And I've always had critics that I trusted, people I loved. My granddad was not a cowboy, he was a farmer. But he knew horses, and he could spot if anything was wrong. And he had a saying, he would always say to me, he'd come look over my shoulder if I was drawing a horse, and if it didn't look good, he would say, "I'd never start for town on that horse." So I always think that if I'm struggling now on a horse sometime, I always think of my granddad.
In your career as an artist, what have been your greatest challenges?
I think ego is your hardest challenge, because people are constantly telling you how wonderful you are. And I always give credit to God, and that keeps me focused of who's really doing this. And I meet so many artists that I've admired, and when I meet them, they're so full of themselves, you can't even hardly stand to be around them. And I pray I never become that. But I see how that happens. I see how that trap is there for other artists. But I don't want to fall into it. That's hard. Another hard thing is people sometimes will just be horse trading, trying to get you to come down on the price of a painting. And they will say to you, "I would buy that, but that deer's legs are too skinny." And I don't believe them. I know they're just horse trading. But the next time I draw a deer, I'm thinking, boy, I hope these legs aren't too skinny. So that's another challenge. Don't listen to people that tell you you're wonderful, and don't listen to people that tell you you're terrible. So,
Jack, what have been your greatest blessings as an artist?
just to get to do this, I know that I'm in exactly the right place at exactly the right time, doing exactly what God wants me to do. And how could you ask for anything more than that? I get to paint cowboys for a living. It's funky. How many people get to do that? I always say a bad day painting is better than a good day digging post holes. That's true.
Okay, think about who you are now and what you know now. And as we say, oh, if I'd only known then what I know now, what I'd do differently. Is there anything that you would do differently?
I had it pretty much figured out from the very beginning. And if I was talking to my young self just getting started, I would just say, enjoy it. You're fixing to have a great ride. I've more than accomplished everything I had set for myself as a young man. And to get paid as well as I do for doing something I would have done as a hobby if I had to have a real job, I don't know that I could give them advice, a younger version of myself advice. I think I had it figured out from the beginning.
So, as younger aspiring artists look at your work and talk with you and get to know you, what would you encourage in their lives when they talk about their goal of becoming a career artist?
I have two trains of thought on that. One part of me wants to say, get out of art, you're not worthy, because the ones that are really going to be artists wouldn't listen to you anyway. But here's what I always tell them, and I believe this. Your work should look like nobody on the history of Earth. Nobody in the history of this planet had your mind, your heart, your talent. They never saw the world the way you see it. That has to come out in your painting. Art is your heart talking to my heart. If you can accomplish that with paint and canvas, you're doing something great. You're elevating the planet. And I believe that, and that's nothing you take trivial, or do 10 versions of a painting because you made money. I want to move you because I'm moved by this.
So as you share yourself and your art with the world, what is your idea of finishing strong? What's the legacy you want to leave?
Well, I want my library of work when I'm finished to stand up against anybody's. I want to have enough great paintings that they say, yeah, that guy was one of the best. That's what I hope, because then God gets the glory, because he's been with me all the way.
Jack, who are some of your favorite living artists right now and why?
As we talked about before, I like the storytellers. So Bill Anton, who's become a friend of mine, he and I have painted horses together. And Howard Turpning, one of my teachers 100 years ago. Guys that can tell a story in painting, they're my favorites. And of course, I can spot a horse that's traced a mile away because a camera lies every time. Not part of the time, every time. And if you photograph a horse coming at you, the head's going to be too big, the back legs are going to be too small. And I can spot, if you know anatomy, you can spot that distortion in a second. So my favorite artists are the ones that draw from life as opposed to use photographs. And those two guys, there are many more. Dave Powell's a dear friend of mine, did this painting over my shoulder, and he's old school like me. But I'll tell you how rare that is. When I was going to paint those buffalo down in Goodnight, I asked the man if I could paint his buffalo. He said, they've been painted dozens of times, sure. So I start taking my paints out of the car, and he said, you mean you're gonna paint them right here? I said, yeah. He said, nobody's ever done that. He said, they always photograph, and then I see the paintings later. But I think you can see so much better. When I would teach those workshops on how to paint a horse from life, people were shocked at how they could progress in 4 days of just 4-day workshop, but they could actually draw a horse from life, and it looked just like that horse. And so those are the guys I admire, the ones that can do that.
And I know that in years past, you have been a visiting artist at Amarillo Art Institute.
I have.
Tell us a little bit about your role as an instructor versus your role as a working artist.
I love when somebody picks up on what I'm trying to express, and I see it in their work, from that point forward, where I've really made a difference in what they're trying to do. I don't think I'm a very good teacher. I am not articulate enough that I can explain the elements of form that go into a painting. I can show you this will work because of that, I can't say, but I can show you how to make it work when I put the paint on. So it always puzzled me that I kept getting so many students sign up again and again, because I really don't think I'm a good art teacher. I've had some great art teachers, so I know what they're like. I'm a good demonstrator, I'll put it that way. But I love doing it. I mean, I don't have time to do it. I'm very conscious of the fact I'm in my 60s, and I want to do as many great paintings as I can in my lifetime. I only have a certain number of days on earth, just like everybody, and I pray that my last painting will be one of my best, and I'm trying to do as many great ones as I can.
In your lifetime, as an artist, as a husband, as a father, as a friend, as an instructor, as a cowboy, in a few words, what would you like to leave the world with besides your beautiful, beautiful masterpieces?
It wouldn't be my art at all. I would rather be known as a nice guy than a great painter any day. I try, and it's not always easy, but I try to be a blessing in the life of everyone I meet. I honestly do, and I wish everybody strived to do that. Sometimes I lose my patience like everybody else does, but I consciously have that prayer. I want to be a blessing to everyone I meet today. And I hope my grandkids and my kids think of me, he was a good dad. He was okay, Papa. And that's first. The art's way below that.
Thank you for letting us be with you in your studio today, Jack Sorenson.
And my pleasure.